Good evening. Namaste. We have a very distinguished, well-accomplished young man that's here to speak about the religion that we're very intent on keeping alive for our generation and many generations coming forward. And a lot of us are concerned about that. We spend so much energy, time, and money in developing our temple to come to this state. A lot of people question us, how is this going to be sustained in the future? In our lifetime, since we came to this country, we have seen churches being abandoned, schools being abandoned, converted into warehouses, and I just heard from one of the upcoming speakers that they bought a church in California, Fremont, converted into a temple. We, as Hindus, should be committed, determined, and dedicated to keep our religion alive so that all these youngsters, 15 years, 20 years from now, can do exactly what we're doing today. Sit in an auditorium like this, enjoy the Hindu culture, Hindu tradition, under the feet of Lord Balaji, and their children should have the same opportunity, even though we are living 8,000 miles away. We're not unique. We're not the only immigrant community living in this country trying to sustain their ethnicity. There are many communities, if you look around where you live, there are Jews, Italians, Polish people. They stick together. They live as a community and they flourish. And that's what our goal should be. We may speak different languages, dress a little differently, eat a little bit of different food, but we're all together in the name of religion. And that's what our goal should be, in the name of Lord Balaji or any God that you believe in. Our pluralistic religion means only one path, being good to yourself, good to your religion, and good to your community. And that's the whole purpose behind the building of this temple. And I'm glad to see so many of you here with youngsters. And every weekend I come here, my heart fills with joy to see so many volunteers spending enormous amount of their valuable time. Instead of watching a Bears game, they were here serving food today. And that's what makes it worthwhile for all of us. So I'm really proud to invite this young man and come to speak to us about how he is going to tell us how we're going to sustain this religious fervor. And you'll meet him in a very short time. He's appropriately named Murali Balaji. What else can you want from a good speaker coming up here? He is the Director of Education and Curriculum Reform for Hindu American Foundation based in Washington, D.C. He's a Fulbright specialist and a former journalist. He has taught at the Temple University, Penn State University, and Lincoln University, all big names, where he served as chair of the Department of Mass Communications, overseeing assessment and curriculum building efforts. A long-time advocate of minority issues, Dr. Balaji is the author of several books and co-editor of the seminal anthologies Desi Rap, Not Music, and Global Masculinities and Manhood. A native of the Philadelphia area, Dr. Balaji earned his BA in journalism from the University of Minnesota and his doctorate in mass communications from Penn State. Building the pillars of our community, bonding advocacy across generations. What an appropriate topic. Using his own experiences as an academic and an advocate, Balaji calls for a new path to sustain the legacy of Hinduism in the United States. And a little historical tidbit. Balaji's father, I was told by T.R. Srinivasan, who is hosting our guest speaker, that Balaji's father was one of the first people that was up on one of our Vimanams during our Kumbhabhishekam, the inauguration, consecration of our temple. What an appropriate time after 27 years, his own son coming and speaking to us about preservation of our Hindu religion. Welcome to Murali Balaji. Dr. Murali Balaji. Creation of our temple.
Thank you for the kind introduction. One of the major problems with the expectations is that you have to live up to them. And I always struggle with when someone reads my bio, oh wait, I have to do all these things that they said I did. Thank you so much. I am so humbled to be invited here today to speak to all of you. A little bit of personal history with the temple. As it was noted, my father came here many years ago. But I was here back in 1988 when the Tamil actress Manorama came in and gave a presentation. Manorama was my favorite actress, so I got her autograph. And in the 25 years since, I have heard directly through Srinivasan Uncle all the development that has happened in the temple. But I want to get us thinking on a larger level here. My speech talks about how the Hindu-American community can rebuild our spiritual locality. Because in addition to the physical structure, we must assess how we can build and sustain a legacy that makes Hinduism intricately part of the American social fabric. So I'll break my speech down into several parts, and I promise I will be straightforward. I'll talk about my own journey. I'll talk about the generational tension that exists. Many of you who are parents have either experienced it or are currently experiencing this. And then the last part is, what can a temple such as the Balaji temple do to take a leadership role to sustain Hinduism? I think every single one of us in this room today wants to sustain Hinduism for the next 50, 100, 150 years in this country. And I think that's so important now in how we define Hinduism in the decades and the generations to come. So, I grew up here, and one of the most important things for me growing up was how ritual was passed down to me by my family. Now, as many of my fellow second-generation Hindu-Americans, I was passed down ritual without necessarily understanding the meanings. More importantly, my parents never had a guidebook on how to balance the desires of being Hindu and the daily reality of being American. In other words, me going to school where the overwhelming majority, in fact, I was the only Hindu for a time in my grade school. And a lot of parents who came in the 60s, post-1965, had a model that they thought could work. It was this idea, and the majority, as you know, overwhelming majority of us in this country, are descended from India. Obviously, there is a global diaspora, but many of our parents' generation believed that they could raise Indian Hindus in America without necessarily acculturating their children to the realities of an American environment. And so when I was in grade school, the textbooks that I read taught me that the caste system was oppressive. They taught me that Hinduism was a patriarchal religion. And in the 80s, there were many movies that came out here that lampooned Hinduism. The movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Some of you might remember that movie. And in one scene, there's a dinner scene where they serve, I think some of you know, chilled monkey brains. So, for the next few weeks, I was bullied incessantly by my classmates. More importantly, I had a teacher who said, well, is that true? Rather than trying to understand what my faith identity was. And so, like many in my generation, I grew up publicly ashamed of my religious identity. At home, I would still practice. But I had no tools to be able to explain my religious identity and take part as an equal in an interfaith dialogue. And so I went through this period, especially as a teenager, where I openly rejected being identified as a Hindu. As I said, at home I would still practice, but in public, you couldn't get me near a temple. I went to the University of Minnesota, and for the first time in my life, I was alone, 1,200 miles away from my family. You know the first thing I did to make myself feel more at home? I put together a very small altar in my dorm room. Murtis of Lord Balaji, of Hanuman, Murugan. And that became my solace. But what made me appreciate my Hindu identity was actually, it had nothing to do with interactions with other Hindus. It was twofold. One, almost every day, someone would come and try to convert me. Campus Crusade. One story, it's funny now, but almost 20 years ago, it wasn't that funny. I was in the gym, just working out. Guy comes and offers to help me work out. I said, great. I need some help putting this weight up. And so he tells me he invites me to play football. I played football in high school, so I said, great, let's go play football. And then he proceeds to invite me to his non-denominational church worship. And I said, nah, I'm good, I'm not Christian. I said that mistakenly as I'm lifting it. The guy abruptly leaves. With me, I'm 17, so 180 pounds at the time was a lot for me. And it proceeded to drop on my chest. I summoned the strength of Lord Balaji. I was somehow able to get that weight off. But this is what confronted me. My embrace of my Hindu identity was in direct response to a perceived threat that I would lose my identity. Think about this. Some of the strongest Hindu populations in the world, Malaysia, Guyana, Trinidad, South Africa, Mauritius, they're Hindus who are strong in their religious and cultural identity because they face that daily threat of conversion. That's how they forge their identity. And so that was one aspect of my embrace. But it also helped that in college, few of my closest friends were African Americans raised in different sects of Christianity. One of my best friends to this day was raised Jehovah's Witness. Another one was raised basically in a Baptist church. And another one was raised spiritual more than religious. But our conversations helped me feel more comfortable in my own skin as a Hindu. So, fast forward years later. Here I am, a second generation Hindu American who has seen many of my peers leave that Hindu identity. Not necessarily converting to other religions, but people who don't necessarily identify as Hindu. And as some of you probably have experienced in your own lives, people who will probably never walk into the doors of the Balaji temple again. And the majority, as